Andrew, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing phenomenally well. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem, man. Thank you for taking time to talk with me. Want to start out, you guys are planning an event here in Columbia. I believe it's the 23rd. Can you tell us a little bit about that event?
Yeah, I'll be in Columbia at a Pints and Politics event to talk about the need to reform and advance our political system so that it listens more to people and less to two parties that at this point are worried more about clashing and winning an argument than in actually solving the problems in our schools and our communities around the country. So come check it out, Pints and Politics in Columbia on Monday.
Okay, and you guys are doing a stop at the State House as well, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We have a stop at the State House and a signature gathering event in Charleston in the state that will be led by some of our state volunteers and activists. We've got a really excited group in South Carolina.
Okay, you recently co-founded the Ford Party. Before we get into that, you ran 2020. You ran as a Democratic candidate for president. Tell me, what made you decide to split from the Democratic Party?
Well, if you all remember, I ran for president on an idea of universal basic income that was championed by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the 60s before his assassination. And when I came off the trail in 2020, unfortunately, I still felt very despondent about the direction our country was headed, and our politics really are getting more polarized and nastier and worse. And so I sat down and tried to figure out why we feel this way. And I think South Carolina is this perfect emblem because you all have incredible national clout, getting moved to first in the nation in terms of the Democratic presidential primary. And yet it's not a swing state, it's a red state. And there are a lot of people who are in South Carolina saying, well, how the heck can we actually influence what's going on in our state because we're in the minority party? And we all know in this environment, if you're in the minority party, there's not a whole lot you can do to get things done. And you've had some phenomenal statewide candidates.
Right.
I'd consider myself friendly or friends with Bakari Sellers, who's an awesome candidate, but just the structure of South Carolina is such that it's going to be a red state in statewide races. So you can see that playing out around the country in different ways, and we're all losing. We're all on the outside looking in one way or another. And so I realized that the two-party system right now is not actually going to advance Dr. King's vision or solve any of the biggest problems of our day because it doesn't have to. And that's why I set out to try and hopefully advance us to a point where we have a more dynamic system where the people are in charge and less so the parties.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about what the Ford Party would stand for in terms of policy or platform, if I would say, if you would call it that?
So what we believe is that the people are the policy and the people are the platform. So what I mean by that is that in South Carolina, there are awesome leaders and people who have a better read on how to improve your lives and solve your problems than I do, or that anyone from outside does. And what we want to do is create a political system where you all actually can determine the future of your community, of your state, of your municipality in a way that right now is not realistic or happening because the country now has been divvied up into essentially blue areas and red areas. And we want a system where everyone is accountable to the people more broadly. And that would, we think, lead to better policy, better schools, better environment. So what this means in terms of what we're championing and why I'm in South Carolina is we think you should not have these party primaries that end up locking out a lot of the people. We think you should have a nonpartisan open primary where anyone can vote for anyone. and then choose the winner via something called ranked choice voting or instant runoff. And so if you have that, then you would have better incentives for your elected representatives. You'd get different people running, different people winning. And then when they were in charge, they'd actually have to answer to you, not a collection of party insiders, but you. And then the policies would change very, very significantly.
Right. Makes sense. I don't know if you follow the news in South Carolina, but just recently we had a high-ranking state senator announced that she was leaving the Democratic Party. For the first time since Senator Tim Scott, we now have an African-American serving as a state senator, African-American serving as a Republican state senator. So African Americans, of course, make up the core of the Democratic Party in South Carolina. And over the past years, they've been felt unheard and neglected. Do you think the Ford Party could develop a platform that could reach out to African American voters?
Yeah, and that's really just a very clear sign of the problem we're trying to solve. And I want to speak to the experience of a preacher named David Cherry, whose congregation's on the west side of Chicago. And David Cherry has joined the Forward Party, is now championing it, because he looks around his own community and says, look, unfortunately, poverty is not getting any better. It's getting worse. And the existing political system doesn't give us the clout or the say or the power necessary to change that. And so he's joined the Forward Party to try and change that with us. The fact that you have a state senator who has switched parties it is a sign of the fact that that individual thought, well, either this party's not a she's an independent. Imagine. I want you all to imagine if your entire state legislature, and this is unrealistic, but just imagine it with me. Imagine if your entire state legislature was independent. And then everyone would look around and say, okay, you have a community, let's say the Black community of South Carolina, that has various problems. And if I were, let's say, a white conservative legislator in South Carolina, I would still have to answer to you all because I'm not insulated by the parties. Right. All of a sudden, you're just my voter because we're all one group of independents, and you can vote me out. I'm not protected. So that's what we think is necessary for David Cherry's community in the west side of Chicago to see progress, for the Black community in South Carolina to see progress. If you were to ask me, do I prefer one party over another? I would confide in you all. I do, and I don't think that's surprising to a lot of people. But I don't believe that this current political system is going to solve the problems of the Black communities in South Carolina, in the west side of Chicago, in New York, where I'm beaming in from right now. And so you have to ask, well, what's the recipe for change? How do we achieve Dr. King's vision? And it starts by trying to reform our political system to say that, look, if you're going to have teams and tribes, which is something of a necessity and it's a natural human thing, you should have more than two tribes. Because if you have two tribes, then you wind up with Black people in one, and then in a place like South Carolina, they're on the outside looking in. You're on the outside looking in.
Right. With that being said, I know during the primary you spoke about during the Democratic presidential primary, you came with the big idea of universal income. Now the Ford Party is talking about reforming the electoral system. Are there any other big ideas that the Ford Party is looking to put forth?
Well, the Forward Party right now is focused on various structural reforms. One thing we're for, as an example, is term limits. We think that people should not be heading to D.C. just to live for decades. So they should be heading there to do the people's work and then come back. And we're having a national convention later this year where we'll hammer out various policy platform elements. There's going to be a contingent from South Carolina. And if someone watching this like, oh, this is interesting to me, join the South Carolina chapter of the Forward Party, and then maybe you can come to the national convention, and then maybe you can help us determine issues that can be the next big idea.
Okay. You spoke of ranked choice voting, and I wanted to, if you could expound on that a little bit. I know just recently, I believe it was in Alaska, Congresswoman Patola actually won in a similar type race to that. Could you go into ranked choice voting a little bit?
Oh my gosh, I would love to because I love ranked choice voting so much. And Mary Peltola defeated Sarah Palin in
Mhm.
that race in large part because of ranked choice voting. So again, imagine an environment where it's not the D's and the R's, but anyone can vote for anyone.
Mhm.
And then if there was a reasonable person, in this case in Alaska, it was Mary Peltola, who's a very earnest, anonymous state legislator. That there were more Alaskans who said, you know what? I can live with Mary Peltola. And that's what happens in a ranked choice voting election because you can rank multiple candidates. You can say my first choice is this person, but shrug, Peltola would be fine at number two. And so it tends to elevate folks who are more reasonable and results oriented and diminish people who just can excite and inflame, let's say 25% of folks on the extreme. If the Republicans had used ranked choice voting in the primary that Trump won, Trump probably doesn't win because in ranked choice voting, you need 51% of the voters to sign off on you. And Trump had 35% that really liked him. It's just the other 10 candidates split up the other 2/3. So if you have ranked choice voting in South Carolina, which is one thing that I'm going to be campaigning for there, you can vote for anyone you want. And whoever wins has to have majority appeal. It'll make it so that your candidates and your leaders are more positive and reasonable and willing to work together.
All right. Well, Andrew, we're looking forward to it. If somebody wanted to find out more about the Forward Party, where would they go?
Yeah, just go to forwardparty.com and then click on South Carolina. You can come see me and meet some wonderful people. You can go to andrewyang.com, but I'll eventually just try and direct you to the Forward Party website anyway. So it's forwardparty.com. Can't wait to be back in South Carolina. I always had a wonderful time there, and you all are going to be determining the direction of the country. We just need to make it so that the direction emphasizes what is going to help us, the people and families of this country, as opposed to the folks who are right now meant to serve us, but a lot of them, unfortunately, just get caught up in the game.
All right. Andrew, thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday.
I'll see you soon.